The massive ship called Harmony came out of the bright blue tunnel of hyperspace and stopped near a yellow star. Commander Thane stood on the bridge looking out at the empty darkness of space. His crystal-like skin caught the light from the control panels as he studied the information flowing across the screens. Something was wrong with the readings from the third planet. Thane had been doing first contact missions for over 300 years. He had met species that could fly through space without ships, creatures made of pure energy, and civilizations that lived inside gas clouds. But this new species called humans confused him more than any other he had encountered. His science officer. Mora moved across the bridge on her 6 tentacles. Her blue skin was darker than usual, which meant she was worried about something. She carried a data pad in 2 of her tentacles, while the others helped her balance. Commander, the energy readings from Earth make no sense, Mora said. Her voice carried the musical tone that all her people used when they were confused. The humans have nuclear weapons that could destroy their entire planet 10 times over. But they also send signals into space, hoping to meet other life forms. Thane turned away from the viewing screen to look at the data. The third planet was covered mostly in water with large brown and green landmasses. White clouds swirled around it in patterns that showed a healthy atmosphere. It looked like thousands of other worlds that supported life. But the behavior of the creatures living there was completely strange. Show me their cities, Thane said. The main screen changed to show images of Earth from high above. Massive structures of metal and glass reached toward the sky. Millions of lights twinkled in patterns that showed advanced technology. Rivers of moving lights showed transportation networks. It all looked normal for a species that had developed space travel, but then Mora showed him other images. Large areas of the planet were covered in smoke and fire. The oceans had strange colors in many places that meant pollution. Huge storms raged across continents, but instead of hiding from them, the humans seemed to build their cities right in their path. They live in the most dangerous places on their planet, Mora said. Look at this city. It sits right on top of a crack in the ground where earthquakes happen all the time. And this one is built at the bottom of a valley where floods come every few years. They know these disasters will happen, but they stay anyway. Thane studied the images with growing confusion. In all his years of contact with new species, he had learned that intelligent life followed certain patterns. They avoided danger. They built their civilizations in safe places. They worked together to protect themselves from threats. The humans seemed to do the opposite. What about their technology? Thane asked. Mora brought up new displays showing human machines and inventions. This is where it gets really strange, Commander. They have the ability to travel between planets. They can communicate across their entire world instantly. They have computers that can solve problems faster than most organic brains. But they also build machines designed specifically to put themselves in danger. The screen showed humans inside metal containers racing at impossible speeds around circular tracks. Other humans jumped out of flying vehicles with only pieces of cloth to slow their fall. Some humans climbed up the sides of mountains covered in ice and snow for no reason that Mora could identify. Are they trying to kill themselves? Thane asked. That's what I thought at first, Mora replied. But then I watched them for several weeks. When disasters happen, they don't die. They adapt. When their cities get hit by storms, they rebuild them stronger. When earthquakes destroy their buildings, they design new ones that can bend without breaking. When floods come, they find ways to live with the water instead of fighting it. Thane had never encountered anything like this. Every other species in the galaxy followed the same basic pattern. When they faced a threat, they either fought it, ran from it, or found a way to avoid it completely. The humans seemed to let the threat happen and then figure out how to survive it. Show me their wars, Thane said. Mora hesitated. War was always the hardest part of evaluating a new species. Some species were naturally peaceful and had never developed weapons. Others had destroyed themselves before reaching the stars. A few had become so good at war that they threatened everyone around them. The images that appeared on the screen made Thane step backward. The humans had fought wars using everything from sharp sticks to weapons that could split atoms. They had killed millions of their own kind over resources, beliefs, and territory. but somehow they had also learned to stop fighting before they destroyed their entire species. "Commander, they still have armies and weapons," Mora said. "But they also have organizations that work to prevent wars. They trade with each other across the entire planet. They share knowledge and resources, even work together to explore space and study their own world." "So they're peaceful now? Not exactly peaceful. More like controlled chaos. They compete with each other constantly, but they also cooperate when they need to. It's like they've learned to use conflict as a tool instead of letting it control." Thane walked around the bridge, thinking about what he had learned. The Galactic Coalition had simple rules for first contact. If a species was too dangerous, they were quarantined or eliminated. If they were peaceful and advanced enough, they were invited to join. The humans didn't fit into either category. "What's your recommendation, Mora?" His science officer's tentacles curled and uncurled as she thought. "I think we need to watch them longer, Commander. I've never seen a species develop along these lines. They should have destroyed themselves centuries ago. Instead, they seem to have turned their self-destructive tendencies into survival advantages." "Survival advantages?" "Yes, sir. Look at their exploration records. They send people to places that would kill most species just to see what's there. They dive to the bottom of their deepest oceans. They climb their highest mountains. They even leave their planet in small metal containers and somehow survive in the vacuum of space. Each time they explore somewhere dangerous, they learn something new that helps their entire species." Thane realized that his 300 years of experience might not be enough to understand the humans. They had created something new in the galaxy, a way of living that embraced danger instead of avoiding it. The question was whether this made them too dangerous to contact or too valuable to ignore. "Continue observation," he ordered. "I want to understand what drives them before we make any decisions about contact. And Mora, send a message to Coalition Command. Tell them we may have found something unprecedented." As the Harmony moved closer to Earth to begin detailed observations, Thane wondered if the humans represented the next step in intelligent evolution, or a warning about what happened when survival instincts went wrong. Either way, the galaxy was about to discover that some species were dangerous not because they wanted to destroy others, but because they refused to be destroyed themselves. 3 months had passed since the Harmony arrived at Earth, and Commander Thane felt more confused than when they had first started watching the humans. Every day brought new observations that challenged everything he thought he knew about intelligent life. The reports from his crew painted a picture of a species that seemed to have evolved backward from normal patterns of survival. Mora had spent weeks studying human recreational activities, and her findings disturbed the entire science team. She showed Thane video recordings of humans throwing themselves off bridges while attached to elastic cords. They called it bungee jumping and seemed to enjoy the experience of almost dying. Other humans strapped boards to their feet and slid down mountains covered in frozen water at speeds that would be fatal if they lost control. "Commander, look at this," Mora said, displaying footage from one of Earth's frozen continents. "These humans traveled thousands of miles to reach this place where the temperature can kill them in minutes. They're pulling sleds loaded with supplies across the ice for no reason other than to see if they can reach the other side." Thane watched the small figures moving across the white wasteland. They moved slowly, fighting against wind that could knock them down and cold that could freeze their blood. Several times the humans fell into cracks in the ice and had to be rescued by their companions. But they kept going, day after day, until they reached their destination. "Are they fleeing from something?" Thane asked. "Are they being forced to make this journey?" "No, sir. They chose to do this. They call it adventure. They seem to seek out situations that test their ability to survive." The tactical officer Brix had been studying human military behavior and was equally puzzled. He showed recordings of human soldiers training in environments that would challenge even the most advanced coalition forces. They crawled through mud under live weapons fire. They jumped out of aircraft at high altitude. They learned to fight in water, in snow, in deserts, and in dense forests. "These humans prepare for war by putting themselves in extreme danger," Brix reported. "But then, They use these same skills to rescue people from natural disasters. They have entire organizations dedicated to going into burning buildings, climbing mountains to reach stranded climbers, and diving into dangerous waters to save drowning people. That makes no sense, Thane said. They risk their lives to save. Lives, yes, Commander. And they volunteer for these dangerous jobs. No one forces them to become rescue workers or emergency responders. They choose to spend their lives running toward danger while everyone else runs away from it. The communications officer had been monitoring human broadcasts and had discovered something even more strange. The humans created entertainment by watching other humans face danger. They had competitions where people fought each other using only their hands and feet. They raced vehicles around tracks at speeds that regularly resulted in crashes. They even created fictional stories about characters who faced impossible odds and somehow survived. They seemed to find danger entertaining, the communications officer reported. Their most popular stories are about people who fight monsters, survive disasters, or overcome impossible challenges. They don't want to hear about characters who live safe, comfortable lives. Thane tried to understand this through the lens of evolutionary biology. Most species developed fear responses to keep them alive. They learned to avoid predators, dangerous weather, and unstable terrain. Fear was a tool that helped intelligent creatures survive long enough to reproduce and pass on their knowledge to the next generation. But humans seem to have broken this pattern. They felt fear like other species, but instead of avoiding what scared them, they moved toward it. They turned their fear response into a motivation to test themselves against whatever threatened them. "Show me how they handle real disasters," Thane ordered. Mora brought up recordings from recent natural disasters on Earth. A massive storm had hit one of their coastal cities, bringing winds that could tear buildings apart and water that flooded entire neighborhoods. Most species would have evacuated the area and rebuilt somewhere safer. The humans did evacuate, but as soon as the storm passed, they returned to their damaged city and began rebuilding in the same location. "They're not learning from their mistakes," Brix observed. "No, wait," Mora said, studying the data more carefully. "Look at how they're rebuilding. They're using stronger materials. They're changing the design of their buildings to better handle wind and water. They're not ignoring the danger. They're adapting to it." The rebuilt city was indeed different from the original. The new buildings could bend in strong winds without breaking. The streets were designed to channel floodwater away from important areas. The humans had learned from the disaster and used that knowledge to build something better. This pattern repeated everywhere they looked. When earthquakes destroyed human cities, the humans rebuilt them with better foundations and flexible structures. When volcanoes erupted and covered towns in ash, humans returned and built new towns that could function even during eruptions. When tsunamis wiped out coastal communities, the humans developed warning systems and evacuation procedures, but still chose to live near the ocean. They're not avoiding the dangers, Thane realized. They're learning to live with them the most. Disturbing discovery came when Mora showed him footage of human space exploration. The humans had built small vessels that could barely protect their occupants from the vacuum of space. They had sent people to their planet's moon in containers that had less protection than a coalition life pod. The journey was dangerous, the landing was risky, and the return trip was uncertain. Dozens of things could have gone wrong, Mora said. Their spacecraft could have failed, or their life support could have stopped working. They could have crashed on the moon's surface. But they went anyway. And now they have a permanent base on their moon. They're planning to send people to other planets in their system. They're building larger ships and developing better technology. Each dangerous mission teaches them something new. Thane began to see a pattern that made him uncomfortable. The Coalition had achieved peace and prosperity by eliminating risk. They had developed technology that could predict and prevent disasters. They had created social systems that resolved conflicts before they became wars. They had built comfortable, safe worlds where their citizens could live long lives without facing significant dangers. But what happened when the prevention systems failed? What happened when an unpredictable threat emerged? The Coalition species had become so focused on avoiding danger that they might have forgotten how to handle it. When avoidance was impossible, the humans had taken a different path. Instead of eliminating risk, they had learned to manage it. Instead of avoiding danger, they had developed skills to survive it. They had turned their entire civilization into a training ground for handling the unexpected. Sir, Mora said quietly, I'm beginning to think we've been looking at this wrong. We've been asking why the humans seek out danger. Maybe the real question is what they're preparing for. Thane looked out at the small blue planet where billions of humans lived their seemingly reckless lives. For the first time since arriving, in this system, he wondered if the humans weren't the ones who were unprepared for the universe. Maybe they were the only ones who truly understood what survival required. Continue monitoring, he ordered, and prepare a preliminary report for Coalition Command. Tell them we may need to reconsider our definitions of dangerous behavior. Commander Thane stood in the docking bay of the Harmony, watching the small human shuttle approach their ship. After 6 months of observation, the Coalition had finally approved first contact with the humans. The meeting would take place in a controlled environment aboard the alien vessel, with full security protocols in place. Everything had been planned down to the smallest detail to ensure the safety of both species. The human shuttle was much smaller than Coalition transport, VEHICLES, and looked fragile compared to the advanced technology of the Harmony. But Thane had learned not to judge human technology by its appearance. Their seemingly primitive devices often performed better than expected, and their simple solutions frequently worked where complex systems failed. The airlock cycled open, and Dr. Elena Martinez stepped through into the alien environment. She was a woman in her 40s with gray hair and calm eyes that seemed to take in everything around her, without showing surprise or fear. She wore a simple blue uniform and carried a small bag that contained what the humans called scientific instruments. What struck Thane immediately was her complete lack of awe or intimidation. Most species, encountering Coalition technology for the first time, showed some combination of wonder, fear, or confusion. Dr. Martinez looked around the docking bay with the same expression someone might use when entering a new room in their own home. Welcome aboard the Harmony, Thane said, using the translation device that converted his crystal-based communication into human speech patterns. I am Commander Thane of the Galactic Coalition. Thank you for the invitation, Elena replied. I'm Dr. Elena Martinez, representing Earth's scientific community. We've been looking forward to this meeting. Looking forward to it? Of course. We detected your ship 3 days after you arrived in our system. Your stealth technology is impressive, but you do leave traces in the electromagnetic spectrum. We've been studying your energy patterns and trying to understand your propulsion system. Thane felt that familiar chill of confusion that he had experienced so often while observing humans. You've been watching us? Naturally. Unknown vessel appears in our space. We track it.
Hey!
Basic survival protocol. We assumed you were observing us as well, probably deciding whether we were safe to contact. Elena smiled slightly. Right. We were right, weren't we? Mora, who had been standing quietly nearby, made a soft musical sound that indicated extreme nervousness. In all her years of first contact missions, she had never encountered a newly discovered species that treated the meeting as a mutual evaluation. Dr. Martinez Thane said carefully, We represent an alliance of civilized worlds. We come in peace. To assess your species for potential membership in our coalition, assess us. Elena's eyebrows rose slightly. That's interesting. What are your criteria for membership? Thane began explaining the coalition's requirements. Species needed to have developed faster-than-light communication, sustainable energy sources, and peaceful conflict resolution. They needed to show evidence of social stability, technological advancement, the ability to contribute to galactic civilization. As he spoke, he noticed that Elena was taking notes on a device that looked primitive compared to coalition technology. But when she asked questions about their assessment process, her queries showed a deep understanding of the challenges involved in managing an interstellar alliance. Tell me about your approach to existential threats, Elena said when he finished. How does the coalition handle extinction-level events? We prevent them, Thane replied. It's advanced planetary defense systems, climate control technology, early warning networks for cosmic dangers. Our worlds are protected by multiple layers of safety systems. Alina nodded thoughtfully. That's one approach. We've taken a different path. We assume that extinction-level events are inevitable and focus on developing the ability to survive them. It's served us well so far. Served you well? We've survived at least 5 major extinction events in our planet's history. Ice ages, asteroid impacts, volcanic eruptions that blocked out the sun for years, plague outbreaks that killed most of our population. Each time, some of us found a way to adapt and rebuild. Bricks, who had been monitoring the conversation from the security station, stepped forward. Dr. Martinez, our observations suggest that your species actively seeks out dangerous situations. Can you explain this behavior? Lena considered the question seriously. We've learned that avoiding all risk is actually riskier than learning to manage risk. If you never face challenges, you never develop the skills needed to handle them when they become unavoidable. We practice surviving difficult situations, so we'll be ready when survival isn't practice anymore. But the mortality rate, Mora said, her tentacles trembling. So many of your people die in these activities.
Some do.
Alina agreed. But their sacrifice teaches the rest of us what works and what doesn't. Every person who climbs a dangerous mountain and fails helps us understand how to climb it successfully. Every experiment that goes wrong shows us how to make the next experiment safer. We learn from our failures instead of just avoiding them. Thane was beginning to understand, something that made him deeply uncomfortable. The Coalition had built their civilization on the principle of minimizing loss. They prevented wars, controlled environments, and eliminated variables that could lead to disaster. It had worked well for thousands of years, creating a stable and prosperous galactic community. But Alina was describing a completely different philosophy. Humans seemed to believe that some loss was acceptable if it led to greater knowledge and better preparation for future challenges. They were willing to sacrifice individuals to improve the survival chances of their entire species. Dr. Martinez, Thane said slowly, what would your species do if faced with a threat that couldn't be avoided or controlled? Something that could destroy your entire civilization. The same thing we've always done, Alina replied without hesitation. We'd study it, test ourselves against it, and find a way to survive it. Some of us would die in the process, but some of us would also learn from their sacrifice. That's how we've survived everything else. And if the threat was so powerful that normal survival methods wouldn't work, then we'd develop abnormal survival methods. We'd try things that had never been tried before. We'd take risks that no reasonable person would take, because unreasonable risks are sometimes the only option when reasonable approaches have failed. The conversation continued for several hours, but Thane found himself increasingly disturbed by what he learned. The humans weren't just reckless or self-destructive. It developed a systematic approach to surviving the impossible by practicing with the merely dangerous. Their entire civilization was designed around the assumption that disaster was inevitable and adaptation was the only real security. When the meeting ended and Alina returned to her shuttle, Thane gathered his senior staff for an emergency conference. The implications of what they had learned were staggering, Commander Mora said. I don't think we can classify them as dangerous in the traditional sense. They're not aggressive toward other species. They're not trying to conquer territory or resources. They're just prepared for threats that the rest of us can't even imagine. That might be exactly what makes them dangerous, Bricks observed. Not dangerous to us, but dangerous to the established order. If other species learn about human survival methods, it could change how everyone thinks about security and risk management. Thane realized that the Coalition was facing a decision unlike any they had made before. The humans weren't asking to join their alliance of safe, controlled worlds. They were offering an alternative approach to survival that challenged the fundamental assumptions of galactic civilization. The question wasn't whether humans were safe enough to contact. The question was whether the galaxy was ready to learn. What humans had to teach about surviving in a universe where safety was always temporary, and adaptation was the only permanent solution. The Coalition's assessment mission was supposed to last 6 months. But 2 years had passed, and Commander Thane still felt no closer to understanding humanity. Every report his team submitted to Coalition Command only raised more questions. The humans continued to behave in ways that defied every model of intelligent behavior that the galaxy had developed over thousands of years. Thane had requested permission to extend their observation period 3 times. Each request had been approved because the coalition leadership was as confused as he was. The humans represented something new in the galaxy, and no one was sure what to do about them. The breakthrough came during what should have been a routine monitoring session. Mora was reviewing footage from one of Earth's most active volcanic regions when she detected an emergency situation developing. A research station built near the base of an active volcano was about to be engulfed by an unexpected eruption. "Commander, you need to see this," Mora called from her station. The main screen showed the human research facility surrounded by flowing lava and clouds of poisonous gas. The heat readings were so intense that they would kill most coalition species instantly. "They'll evacuate, of course," Brix said. "No intelligent being would stay in that environment." But the humans didn't evacuate. Instead, they began implementing what appeared to be an emergency protocol that involved moving deeper into the danger zone rather than away from it. "What are they doing?" Thane asked. "Sir, they're going back into the volcanic area," Mora replied, her voice filled with disbelief. "There are still people trapped in the research station. The evacuation shuttle couldn't reach them because of the heat and gas." Thane watched in horrified fascination as a team of humans approached the volcanic zone wearing protective suits that looked inadequate for the extreme conditions. The suits were clearly improvised, built from materials available at the site rather than designed for this specific emergency. "Those suits won't protect them," the engineering officer reported. "The heat levels will kill them in minutes." "They know that," Mora said quietly. "Listen to their communications." The audio feed from the rescue team was calm and professional. The humans acknowledged the extreme danger they were facing. They discussed the probability of death. They made arrangements for their families in case they didn't return, and then they walked into the volcanic zone anyway. "Rescue Team Alpha, this is Base Command," came a voice over the communications channel. "We show critical heat levels at your location. You need to abort the mission." "Negative, Base Command," replied the team leader. "We have visual contact with the trapped personnel. Beginning extraction now." What followed was the most remarkable display of survival behavior that Thane had ever witnessed. The humans moved through an environment that should have killed them instantly, using tools and techniques improvised on the spot. When their protective suits began to fail, they found ways to repair them using volcanic rock and metal from the research station. When their breathing equipment stopped working, they created emergency air supplies from chemicals they found in the facility. The rescue took 4 hours. By the time it was over, 3 of the rescue team members had suffered severe injuries, and all of them had been exposed to levels of heat and toxic gas that would have been fatal to any other known species. But they had saved 6 people who would otherwise have died. "How did they survive that?" Brix asked. "The same way they always survive," Mora replied. "They adapted to conditions that should have killed them. They turned the volcanic environment into a tool for their own rescue." Thane realized he was witnessing something that went beyond normal survival behavior. The humans hadn't just endured the volcanic environment, they had learned to work with it. They had used the heat from the lava to power emergency equipment. They had used volcanic gases to create chemical reactions that produced breathable air. They had turned a deadly disaster into a source of the very resources they needed to survive. Over the following months, this pattern repeated itself everywhere Thane looked. When massive storms threatened human cities, the humans didn't just hide from them. They found ways to harness the wind and rain for their own purposes. When earthquakes shook their buildings, the humans studied the movement of the ground and learned to build structures that could dance with the earth instead of fighting it. The most disturbing example came when Thane observed human deep-sea exploration. The humans had built vehicles that could descend to the bottom of their planet's deepest oceans, where the pressure would crush any normal spacecraft, and the darkness was complete. But instead of simply surviving in these conditions, the humans had learned to thrive in them. "They're not just exploring the deep ocean," the science officer reported. "They're farming it. They've learned to grow food in the crushing depths. They've found ways to extract energy from the pressure differences between the surface and the bottom. They've turned the most hostile environment on their planet into a resource. Thane began to understand that the Coalition had fundamentally misunderstood what made humans dangerous. They weren't dangerous because they were aggressive or territorial. They weren't dangerous because they had powerful weapons or advanced technology. They were dangerous because they could survive and adapt. Two conditions that would destroy any other known species. The implications of this realization were staggering. The Coalition had built their civilization on the assumption that there were limits to what intelligent life could endure. They had created safety systems and peaceful societies because they believed that survival required avoiding extreme conditions. The humans had proven that assumption wrong. "Sir," Mora said during one of their regular briefings, "I think we need to reconsider our entire approach to this species. We've been trying to determine whether they're safe to contact, but I think the real question is whether we're safe from the changes they might bring to our understanding of survival." "What do you mean?" "Humans don't just survive disasters, Commander. They learn from them. Every catastrophe teaches them something new about how to handle the next catastrophe. They're not just adapted to their own planet's dangers. They're developing the ability to adapt to any danger they might encounter." Thane looked out at the small blue planet where billions of humans continued their seemingly reckless lives. For the first time since beginning this mission, he wondered if the humans weren't the species that needed to be evaluated for safety. Maybe they were the species that would teach the rest of the galaxy what real survival looked like. "Prepare a full report for Coalition Command," he ordered. "Tell them we may have discovered something that changes everything we thought we knew about intelligent life in the universe." But even as he gave the order, Thane suspected that no report could adequately describe what they had found. The humans weren't just another species to be cataloged and categorized. They were a living demonstration that survival was possible, under conditions that the rest of the galaxy considered absolutely impossible. The emergency signal reached the Harmony while Commander Thane was preparing his final report on humanity. The message came directly from Coalition Command, marked with the highest priority codes he had ever seen. Something was threatening the entire galaxy. All observation missions were being recalled immediately. The Void Plague had emerged from the empty space between galaxies without warning. It was unlike any threat the Coalition had faced in their thousands of years of civilization. The phenomenon consumed energy and matter as it moved through space, leaving behind regions of absolute nothingness. 3 star systems had already been completely destroyed, their suns extinguished and their planets reduced to cosmic dust. Coalition scientists were working frantically to understand the plague and develop countermeasures. Every world in the Alliance had activated emergency protocols. Populations were being moved to underground shelters. Military forces were being deployed to evacuation zones. The greatest minds in the galaxy were focused on finding a solution before the plague could spread further. Thane received orders to leave Earth immediately and report to Coalition headquarters. The human assessment mission was being terminated, so that all available resources could be devoted to the crisis. But as he prepared to depart, he found himself thinking about the conversations he had had with Dr. Elena Martinez. What would your species do if faced with a threat that couldn't be avoided or controlled? He had asked her. We'd study it, test ourselves against it, and find a way to survive it, she had replied. Against direct orders, Thane made an unauthorized detour to Earth's orbital station. He needed to know how humanity would respond to an unstoppable threat. The answer might not help the Coalition, but his 2 years of observation had taught him that humans often found solutions where others saw only problems. The orbital station was buzzing with activity when Thane arrived. Somehow, the humans had already detected the Void Plague and were mobilizing their own response. Dr. Martinez met him at the docking port, and her calm demeanor was the same as always, despite the magnitude of the threat they faced. "Commander Thane," she said, "I assume you're here about the cosmic phenomenon heading toward our galaxy. You know about it? You detected the energy signature 6 hours ago? Our deep space monitoring systems picked up the gravitational disturbances when the 3rd star system was consumed. We've been analyzing the data ever since." Thane felt that familiar mix of confusion and admiration that humans always inspired in him. The Coalition's best scientists are working on this crisis. There may be no solution. There's always a solution, Elena replied. Sometimes it's just not the solution you expect. She led him to a command center where dozens of humans were working at computer terminals, analyzing data streams and running calculations. The atmosphere was intense, but not panicked. The humans approached the extinction-level threat with the same methodical determination they brought to every challenge. "We can't stop it," Alina explained as they watched the data flowing across the screens. "The plague is too massive and too powerful for any conventional approach. But we don't need to stop it. We need to understand it. Understanding won't save us from extinction. Understanding is the first step to survival." These patterns, Alina pointed to a display showing the plague's movement through space. It's not random destruction. There's a logic to how it consumes matter and energy. If we can understand that logic, we can find a way to work with it instead of against it. Over the following days, Thane watched the humans implement their response to the Void Plague. While coalition forces prepared for evacuation and defensive measures, the humans began doing something that seemed completely insane. They were moving toward the plague instead of away from it. "You're sending ships directly into the phenomenon?" Thane asked in disbelief. "We're sending probes first," Alina corrected. "Unmanned vehicles designed to gather data from inside the plague itself. We need to understand what happens during the consumption process. The probes will be destroyed. Of course they will. But they'll transmit data for a few seconds before they're consumed. Those few seconds of information are more valuable than years of observation from a safe distance." The first wave of probes was destroyed within minutes of entering the plague zone. But the data they transmitted revealed something important. The plague wasn't simply destroying matter and energy, it was converting them into something else. Something that existed in a different dimensional space. "It's not destruction," Alina explained. "It's transformation. The plague is moving matter and energy from our dimension into another one. If we can understand the transformation process, we might be able to reverse it." The human response became more aggressive as they learned more about the plague. They sent manned vessels into the danger zone, accepting casualty rates that would have been unacceptable to any coalition species. But each mission gathered more data, and the data revealed more about how the plague functioned. Dr. Martinez Thane said during one of their briefings, "The mortality rate among your research teams is over 60%. How can you justify continuing?" "Because we're learning faster than the plague is spreading," Alina replied. "Every person we lose teaches us something that might save billions of others. The mathematics work in our favor if we can maintain the current rate of discovery." It was the most coldly logical approach to mass casualties that Thane had ever encountered. The humans were treating their own people as acceptable losses in service of a greater survival strategy. But it was working. Their understanding of the plague grew with each mission. While coalition scientists remained baffled by the phenomenon, the solution, when it came, was typically human in its apparent impossibility. The plague consumed matter and energy by creating a resonance pattern that opened doorways between dimensions. The humans couldn't stop the resonance, but they could alter it. By introducing specific quantum frequencies at precisely calculated intervals, they could create a feedback loop that would cause the plague to consume its own expansion energy. "You're going to teach the plague to destroy itself?" Thane asked. "Not destroy," Alina corrected. "Transform. We're going to redirect its consumption process so that it feeds on its own growth instead of on normal matter and energy. It will still exist, but it won't be able to expand into our space." The implementation required sending human volunteers directly into the heart of the plague with quantum manipulation devices. It was a suicide mission with no possibility of rescue or retreat, but volunteers stepped forward immediately, eager to test their species' survival skills. Against the ultimate challenge, the mission succeeded because the humans were willing to do what no other species could imagine. They walked into the mouth of cosmic annihilation and planted the seeds of their own survival. The plague began consuming itself, its expansion halted by the feedback loop the humans had created. As the immediate crisis passed, Thane realized that he had witnessed something unprecedented in galactic history. The humans had defeated an extinction-level threat, not through superior technology or military force, but through their willingness to embrace the very danger that threatened them. "Dr. Martinez," he said as they watched the plague collapse into itself. How did you know that approach would work? We didn't know, she replied. But we knew that conventional approaches wouldn't work. When the impossible becomes necessary, you have to be willing to attempt the impossible. Thane's final report to Coalition Command was brief but decisive. He recommended immediate full membership for humanity, with a classification that had never been used before. The humans weren't dangerous to other species, but they were absolutely essential for galactic survival. The galaxy's greatest threats, he realized, weren't the ones that sought to conquer or destroy. They were the ones that couldn't be stopped by conventional means. Against such threats, the only defense was a species stubborn enough to refuse defeat and creative enough to find solutions where others saw only certain death. The Coalition had spent centuries making the galaxy safe and predictable. Humanity would spend the coming millennia ensuring that safety and predictability didn't become weaknesses when the truly impossible challenges arrived. In a universe where the unthinkable was always possible, the humans had proven that survival belonged to those who were willing to think the unthinkable and do the undoable in service of life itself.